For your patience over the last 5 minutes or so. My name is Matthew Phillips, and welcome to the second presidency webinar, which will give detailed guidance, particularly for participants, on the Talanoa dialogue at the April-May session in Bonn. I would like to thank Ambassador Luke Danuvalu, COP23 Chief Negotiator, and Minister Ines Siriatu, BT's high-level climate champion, for giving up their time today to speak to us, and also to Claudio Forna, who joined us from UN Climate Change. We look forward to a healthy Q&A discussion in the second half of this webinar, so please do write any questions you may have in the WebEx chat at any moment, and we will try to respond to those later on. So to begin, I would like to invite Ambassador Danuvalu to speak. Ambassador, thank you.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone. Thank you for coming online and participating in this webinar. Really value and appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit more about the preparations for the Talanoa dialogue that will be held in a couple of weeks' time in Bonn, and also to give you the opportunity to ask any questions or for us to clarify anything that you might have to help in terms of your preparations. So just to start off with, the first thing I wanted to say is that this is really about enhancing ambition, and one of the focus for us is to structure and organize the Talanoas in a manner that allows for all the participants, both parties and non-party stakeholders, in a way that their contributions and stories are told in an atmosphere of empathy and trust, and also to allow you to share those things that are working, but also equally to share those things that are not working, so that we can learn from each other and see how we can help each other. And so I think that is really the atmosphere that we want to have and that we are looking to create inside of the Talanoa dialogue. And so the guidance that we have provided up to now is all geared towards that, and we hope that you have found it useful. The latest one being published on the Talanoa portal a couple of weeks, last week, I think. And so it outlines the structure and the sequence of the Talanoa dialogue, beginning with an opening plenary, which will be on the 2nd of May, and then it will be followed by the Talanoa itself, which will be on Sunday the 6th, and then report back plenary, which will have to be scheduled 2 days after the Talanoas, essentially to allow time for the presidencies and the secretary to collect all the inputs and present it back, and allow time for everyone to provide further reflections and feedback on the summary of the Talanoas. And then we will have a closing plenary on Wednesday the 9th of May. And so what we want to provide in terms of this structure and this sequence is an opportunity for the presidencies to lay out some of the guiding framework for how participation and the contributions or the stories that are told in the Talanoas are to be made, and that will be done during the opening plenary, and allow parties or non-party stakeholders to also clarify any uncertainties or queries that they might still have on that occasion, which is the 2nd of May, so that when we do have the Talanoas, which will be in 6 groups running in parallel for each of the 3 questions throughout the entire day of Sunday, May 6th, we're going straight into the Talanoas. And so, as you would have noted, hopefully from the guidance note that was published last week, the time frame within which contributions are to be made would be 3 minutes each, so we allow all 35 participants in each Talanoas to share their stories. And then we have some time for just open exchange and feedback, or just reflections on what each one have shared. And then a little bit of time at the end of each round or question to have the repertoire provide a quick summary of what was discussed and the key messages that would then be part of the summary that should be given at the report back session. So those are essentially what we have discussed and are now in the guidance in terms of the arrangements for the Talanoas in May, in a couple of weeks' time. But happy to take any questions that you may still have. But I think for now, let me stop there. We want to also give time to the Honorable Minister and Climate Champion, Mr. Seriratu, to talk a little bit more about the Talanoas before we go into any questions. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Danivalu. I will probably talk more on the main sessions of the Talanoa dialogue, as already alluded to earlier by Ambassador Danivalu. It's scheduled for Sunday, the 6th of May, 2018. I'll start off by saying that the in-depth Talanoa sessions will be organized into groups, and this will take place again on Sunday the 6th of May at the UN campus from 9:30 a.m. and ending at 6:30 p.m. The sessions will be first on the first question will be covered from 9:30 to 12. That is on where are we, and then we will have lunch break from 12 to 1 p.m. and then from 1 p.m. to 3:30 we will take the second question on where do we want to go, and then there will be a coffee break from 3:30 to 4, and then finally from 4 o'clock to 6:30 we will tackle the third question on how do we get there. And there will be 6 groups for each of the questions, and I will cover that again in one of the subsequent slides. And the 6 groups will work in parallel to address each of the 3 questions of the Talanoa dialogue. On the in-depth session again, I've talked about the 6 groups. Each Talanoa group will consist of about 35 participants, and that is comprised of 30 party representatives and 5 non-party stakeholder representatives. And the party representatives may or may not change when moving to the next question, depending on their preference. And the non-party stakeholder representatives will be assigned to the question of their stated preference, or according to the type of contributions they have expertise and or experience with. And all attempts will be made to ensure that there is broad regional representation, sectoral representation, and as well as gender balance and the inclusion of mitigation and adaptation stories. The composition of each Talanoa will be announced on the Talanoa platform, and a national from Fiji with the experience and knowledge on the Talanoa tradition will facilitate each Talanoa group, supported by repertoires from Fiji and Poland. On the layout for each of the Talanoa sessions, wherever possible, participants will be sitting in a circle. As already mentioned by Dr. Danivalu, it's a very relaxed atmosphere of trust, and so instead of tables, we will be sitting around in circle with no tables in true Talanoa fashion. So please prepare yourself for this no table arrangement. The time allocated for storytelling will be about 1 hour 30 minutes, and to allow all 85 participants to share their story, we need to keep all stories to about 3 minutes. Therefore, we urge you to make the most of the 3 minutes by keeping your story focused with clear articulation of your key messages. Discussions within each Talanoa will proceed as follows. To kick off, the moderator will remind the group of the ground rules for the discussions, define what is expected from the participants, and provide a short introduction to the question to be considered. Following the introduction, participants will be invited to share their stories. Going around the circle again, I remind participants of the 3-minute allocation given to each. And after the stories have been shared, the moderator will engage all participants in an open exchange. At the end of each Talanoa, the rapporteur will summarize the key general messages from the discussions. A few ground rules for all the participants. One, the principles of Talanoa. Firstly, the principles of Talanoa will need to be respected at all times during the session, and this means respecting each other and their stories. Your stories and interventions should be constructive and inspirational. There should be no shaming of other countries, organizations, or individuals. There should be no finger pointing or blaming or holding party, organization, individual, initiative, program, company, etc. accountable. We should listen patiently to what everyone has to say, give feedback that is constructive and that builds on each other's stories, and do not criticize or be accusatory of other stories. We will need to stay focused on the question addressed and not wander off to the other questions. As much as possible, we encourage if you can avoid reading of a script, but relay your story naturally with your own words. Please share stories with concrete and credible experiences, lessons, achievements, progress, and challenges. Stories that will be helpful to others and will also force them to pause and think. So in this regard, avoid rhetorical and theoretical stories and interventions. And given the short time allocated, there will be no time for rambling stories. Please relay your own story and not another country's or another organization's. And a very important point to keep in mind is to present on the issues you would like to be discussed at the political phase in COP24 and to be reflected in the final outcome. On the 3 questions, there are a few points to consider when sharing your stories under each of the 3 questions, and please be reminded to be concrete with your real examples and staying focused on the questions on where are we, things like your current experiences with regard to climate change, impacts, initiatives, studies, etc., your current actions and initiatives on climate change, and mitigation or adaptation, and how far have you progressed with taking climate action and the environment and factors that have enabled you to get where you are. And where do we want to go? On what the vision of your country, organization, sector relating to a low emissions and climate resilient future for 2030 and for beyond? What new short and medium term actions, initiatives or targets would be linked to that vision? And what would be the impact of your commitments in terms of reduced emissions and or increased resilience? And on the third question of how do we get there, firstly, very briefly describe where you want to go and your overall vision. Elaborate on the instruments needed and conditions to enable you to achieve your vision and to address any challenges, if any, and what is needed from the UNFC processes, leaders and other stakeholders to achieve this vision. And again, I remind participants that you need to be concrete with your examples and stay focused on the questions. On the wrap-up and reporting, soon after each session, the rapporteur will report on the draft key points coming from the Talanoa. However, on Tuesday, the 8th of May, a report meeting will be organized during the lunch break and will run for about 1.5 hours. The moderator and rapporteurs will present to parties and non-party stakeholders the draft key messages identified during the in-depth Talanoa discussions, and participants will then be invited to provide their feedback before the report is finalized for presentation at the closing plenary on Wednesday, the 9th of May. Thank you, and
thank you very much for those valuable remarks, Minister, and also many thanks to the Ambassador for his introduction. I would now like to dedicate the next part of this discussion to all of your questions. We've already been receiving a large number of questions from you, and please do continue to send in any questions that you may have. I'd like to start by asking our Talanoa lead at the Secretariat here, Claudio, 2 questions. Firstly, Claudio, can you tell us who will be selected as speakers for non-party stakeholders? And secondly, can people still register for the Sunday Talanoa?
Yes, thank you very much, Matthew, and good afternoon to all. The process for selection of speakers at the Talanoa was closed a couple of weeks ago, so there is not any more chance to register. The Secretariat, on behalf of the champions and the Presidency, has published a list of the speakers. You will find this list in the Talanoa platform. It's there, very visible on their latest updates. And the speakers of those for the non-party stakeholders would be basically the person that appears as identified in that table.
Thank you very much, Claudio. Ambassador, if I could now direct a question at you, if I may. This question is, will there be an opportunity for party statements during the opening plenary meeting? Ambassador.
Yes. Clearly time will be allocated during the opening plenary, but mainly to allow groups of parties to deliver statements on the expectations about the Talanoa dialogue. And because of the need to keep it focused, these statements would have to be fairly concise also, so 2 to 3 minutes, and focused on the subject. And of course, we want to also use the opportunity of the opening plenary to provide guidance, and as the Minister has outlined, to also set the scene on the Talanoa sessions that will follow. And so one of the things that we are planning for the opening plenary is to have a kind of a panel that would inform in its own way the Talanoa that will be held.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for that answer. We've also received a question to the climate champion, Minister. Is there any difference between the 6 Talanoa groups in May, and is it possible to participate in more than one? Thank you, Minister.
Thank you. There is no difference. Each session again will be made up of about 30 party representatives and 5 non-party representatives. There will be no thematic distinction between the 6 groups, and the sectoral and regional and gender balance will be prioritized for each of the groups. Again, parties are invited to send 1 representative to participate in each Talanoa session on each of the questions, and of course, the participants for each group may change when moving to the next question, depending on the nominated representative. for each of the three questions.
Thank you very much, Minister, for that response. I'd like to turn once again to Claudia, and also just to everyone who's sending in questions, thank you for these. We are obviously trying to get to all of them within the space allocated to this call. Claudia, I'm just going to do some quick-fire questions at you, if I may, and I'll just ask them in turn. The first question is, will there be seats for the audience at small Talanoa?
No, there is no audience for the Talanoas because of methodology. The room is going to be closed, so this is why we had this expression of interest. So it is not that the meeting is it is not a matter of transparency; it's a matter of methodology.
Thank you, Claudia. Second question: can graphs or documents be circulated at the Talanoas?
Well, the methodology, as we understand, is that this is storytelling, so it is a short storytelling, so we are discouraging people from, there's definitely not going to be PowerPoint or projectors in the room. It's mostly an oral exercise. If there are things that want to be shared, it is better that you do that through the platform because we're making public all the material there.
And final question for you, if I may, Claudia. Will there be a reporting back session for Talanoa participants? And also, but as an extension to that question, will such reports be available to all?
Yes. The reporting back session is an open meeting so that all those that could not attend the small Talanoa hear what was said, what messages were highlighted. We will be producing reports from detailed reports after the session on them, and they will be placed on the platform. So it is basically a transparent process. And there is an additional question that is related to that, and it's the participation of observers during the plenary. We have indicated that this is in accordance with practice for plenaries. So there is going to be at the end a space for constituencies to provide their statements, and additional information on this is available on the platform.
Thank you very much, Claudio. Ambassador Zanavano, if I could direct a second question for you. This question is, how will the outcomes of the May sessions impact the political phase? Thank you, Ambassador.
Well, that's a good question. Essentially, that's one of the key messages that we had given out earlier in the context of preparations and the participation at the Talanoa for 2018, that you think about how you're going to influence the political discussion and the political phase, which will be at COP24 in Poland. So what will happen is that the outcomes of the May sessions will be summarized into a report. It includes the summary of the submissions that were registered on the portal and are received up to the 2nd of April, as well as the outputs of the technical expert meetings. And that summary report will already provide some early signals on the elements that are to be discussed under the three core questions at the political phase in COP24. The summary report, along with other submissions and inputs that will be received for the remainder of the year up to the 29th of October, which is the second deadline for all submissions in respect to the Talanoa dialogue. Those will be set into the final synthesis report, which will be presented at the political phase and will inform the discussions and the dialogue by leaders during that political phase.
Thank you very much for that answer, Ambassador, on the impact on the political phase. We have received another question for the climate champion, Minister Inies Suriatu. Minister, the question is, what level of representation is expected in the in-depth sessions, i.e. the technical experts versus heads of delegation, or both? Thank you, Minister.
Thank you again. It's encouraged that all levels of representation are welcome, given the broad scope of the discussions. That is both technical elements and policy issues. that can take place under the three questions of where are we, how do we get there, or where do we want to go, and how do we get there. However, again, we encourage that the researchers have the knowledge of the dialogue's central questions, and of course can engage in a discussion that effectively prepares the ground for a political discussion at the end of the year that Ambassador Talanoa has just explained earlier. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that answer. Thank you very much for your answer there, Minister. I'd now like to do a kind of quick round of questions for Claudio, who's getting a lot of the technical questions there, if I may. The first question, Claudio, is can speakers to the Talanoas bring an advisor with them?
No, there's only one seat per party and one seat per representative, so people have to be ready just to share their stories and be well prepared for the discussion. But there's, again, as I said, because of methodology, it's a discussion among the people that are sitting at the Talanoa.
Thank you, Claudio. Second quick-fire question. Will there be an additional session for the Talanoa?
We are not expecting to have activities during the intersessional. However, and the ambassador has already encouraged people to have activities of the Talanoa in their own countries and continue to do meetings. And finally, Claudio, how will non-party stakeholders provide feedback? There's two ways. In the closing plenary, as I said, this is conducted in accordance with plenary meetings, so there's going to be a space for non-party stakeholders to provide feedback. We're still assessing how the reporting back session is going to be advanced. There might be an opportunity there as well to do it. But in addition, the process of submission of inputs is open, and they can do so as well by this channel.
Thanks very much, Claudio. If I could turn back to you, Ambassador Talanoa, I have two questions which I will ask you in turn, if that's all right. The first question, Ambassador, is how will the discussion in the Talanoas be structured if there are only 2.5 hours per question?
Sorry, I was muted. Well, obviously we want to give a chance to each of the participants, 35 participants in each Talanoa group, to share their story. And so we want to give them around 2 to 3 minutes. And then that, of course, will mean that we can take about 3/4 of the 2.5 hours for each party or each participant to share their story. And then leave about 15 or so minutes to have a free-flowing discussion, perhaps some key messages coming from one of the participants in sharing their story, or someone may wish to have to clarify any issue that may have emerged during the storytelling part. And so we'll use that time in the last 15 minutes to have that kind of discussion. And so the last 5 or 10 minutes, of course, will be used to hear the summary of key messages from each group presented by the repertoire for each Talanoa group.
Thank you very much again, Ambassador. I have one follow-up question, if that's all right, and this is really looking to you for inspiration, really. The question is simple. It is simply, can you provide an example of a story? Thank you, Ambassador.
Well, I think the kind of stories that we could share are both personal, but I think if we're looking at what will be influential and have an impact in the political phase, then we have to consider that on a more macro level. And so if I were to share a story, it will be on the impact of Tropical Cyclone Winston on our communities, including my own village, that rely on agricultural products just for daily living. The cyclone wiped away much of that. Breadfruit that are seasonal now are being put back and being upset as seasonal crop. Cassava or yucca, as it is more commonly known, has also been affected. So staple diets are affected. We now have to rely on substitutes, which are rice or flour products. And that, of course, requires that we find alternative sources of financing these needs that we have, which means reliance on government assistance in terms of subsidies or other types of assistance that are normally provided in the aftermath of a cyclone. But those, of course, are not long-term. And of course, government's own means of assisting our own national is limited. And so, of course, the support from our partners, development partners, and the UN agencies that do provide relief and assistance and rehabilitation afterwards are, of course, also the means by which we sustain ourselves in the immediate aftermath. And so, I think in that regard, for my own story, I could develop that further so that it's addressing both where we now, where do we want to go, and how do we get there. So just in a nutshell, that's putting it in a broad spectrum, but I think the opportunity for focusing on one aspect or one particular sector, whatever is most impactful from your own perspective, what is working for us is the support from the government. But what is not working is how we ensure that the sustainability of that. And for us, it's not possible to do anything against strong winds, especially Category 5 cyclones. And this is not to say anything about infrastructure or the building codes. I'm just talking about agriculture alone. So, I hope that's helpful in terms of formulating stories from your own perspective. But happy to clarify if there's any questions or follow-up.
Thank you very much for offering that detailed perspective, Ambassador, which I think everyone on this webinar will find highly instructive. I'd now like to turn back again to Claudio for 3 quick-fire questions, if I may, Claudio. The first question is, are participants to the 6 Talanoas automatically registered for the entire session?
No, we're looking into this, but for the time being and because of our internal rules, they can only attend those that are not registered for the whole session can only attend the Sunday Talanoas. More information on this will be shared later on.
Thank you, Claudio. Question number 2, will reports from the Talanoas be verbatim?
We don't produce verbatim reports in the UNFCCC for most of the things we do, so this is going to be a summary, and it will evolve through time, so people should be taking notes, but in the end, the reports are going to be mostly distilling key messages, so in that, of course, detail gets lost, but we will try to provide as much detail as possible in the annexes.
Thank you, Claudio. And the final question is, will groups break into smaller groups?
No, as Ambassador explained, the methodology is quite simple. The chair will give the floor to whoever wants to tell a story, so stories will be told at the beginning, and then there's going to be an exchange once the amount of stories have been extinguished. There will be a discussion, so it is expected that the group stays as one during the whole methodology.
Thank you very much, Claudio. And we are receiving a big number of questions, so I hope you'll forgive me, Ambassador, if I could turn back to you because we've received a number of follow-up questions. The first question, Ambassador, is, are the stories that are going to be told during the Talanoas more about hard, detailed facts, or rather should they be about food for inspiration and conveying that inspirational message? Ambassador.
Well, we would like a balanced way, because I think the opportunity is there both to share hard facts or science-based activities or information, especially in terms of where you want to go or where are you now, but also just the practical realities that are being experienced both by parties and non-party stakeholders in terms of the work that they do. And so a balanced approach that presents both hard facts and also just the experience is something that we think would be valuable to inform the political phase.
Thank you very much for that answer, Ambassador. If I could also ask you a follow-up question, and then I will turn back probably to Claudio. The follow-up question to you, Ambassador, is how can we ensure that questions don't mean that we go into silos, that we can keep this cross-cutting, as it were?
We would like as much as possible to keep the story and the discussions within the three core questions and frame our stories along those lines. Of course, we understand that there is, in essence, a cross-cutting across all of those questions. And we've also had some earlier questions about the need to have some level of continuity or consistency in terms of the stories that are shared. But, this is something that the participants themselves will have to determine. But in terms of putting some sort of structure so that our discussions are focused and concise, we would like to have the discussions focusing on each of the questions and then in the end bring them all together. But also bearing in mind that there's so much going on out there in terms of climate action, but also there are a lot of challenges that are being faced and experienced by everyone. And to determine which of those and to prioritize what of the hundreds of things that you would possibly share, what is the one or two that you have space to, that you would like to present for the international community to consider based from your own experiences. I think it means that there's some level of focus that we would want to have in terms of the whole outline of the Talanoas.
Thank you very much again for that answer, Ambassador. I'm just going to turn finally, I think, to Claudio for a couple more questions before we close down this webinar. The first question is, Claudio, can representatives be changed?
Well, ideally not, but of course we're not forcing people to stay with them. So if an organization has been selected and intends to change the participant, they have to let us know well in advance, because we are organizing the groups taking into account among others gender balance. So it's very important that they tell us as soon as possible. This does not apply to parties. With parties is different. We are having a longer term registration with them, but we need to know the names of the party representatives as soon as possible.
Thank you, Claudio. And the next question to you, if I may, if the stories that are being told don't fit with the template, is that something that should be cause for concern?
No, there's two different things here. The templates were prepared mostly for people to submit input, so it's more structured, and this is being taken into account for the whole of the year in how we're developing different documents. The idea of the stories is more when the discussions inside the Talanoa take place. Of course, it is great that the information is the same. It's just the way that you are giving that information. And sorry, they're asking me to repeat how non-party stakeholders can provide feedback. Sorry, how people not attending the Talanoa can provide feedback. Again, in the reporting session, there's going to be the floor is going to be open for comments, and this is going to be in accordance with practice for the plenary. So constituencies will be given the floor to provide feedback, and at the closing plenary, so the closing of the dialogue, the same applies. There's going to be a space for constituencies to provide feedback at the end.
Thank you very much, Claudio. Just a couple of other points to add. The first is that we will be sharing the slides that Minister Seriatu went through earlier, so do not worry about those. Those will be sent around in due course. And the second thing is, if you want to kind of share the recording of this, we will also be publishing that online, so other people who missed out on the opportunity of listening to these questions and answers will get the opportunity to listen in. The final question is around whether there are press conferences that are going to be coinciding with the Talanoa. This is something that myself and the communications team here at the Secretariat is looking into. They will either coincide with the opening of the Talanoa on the first Wednesday or the closing of the Talanoa on the second Wednesday, and we are currently exploring options with both the presidency and obviously with our executive secretary on exactly the format of those, and we'll be in touch with you with more details on those in due course. So I think now all that is left to say is thank you to everyone for joining the webinar. There have been lots of you and lots of questions, so I hope we've helped to answer some of those lingering concerns that you may have had. I'd also like to give special thanks to Ambassador Talanoa, Minister Seriatu and Claudio Forna for their valuable contributions in answering as many of your questions as possible. And finally, we obviously look forward to seeing you at SB 48. So thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye.
That was very good.
Yeah? Okay?
Yeah. That was very good. We're getting better now. Yeah? See, the questions, they were like, I have never seen so many questions.
It's much better. I much prefer doing like kind of, because it really allows for that interaction. I didn't want to say more about the press conference.
Excellent webinar.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Could you Greg, what do you have? Yeah.
Okay. Great.